Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is another Red Pill Religion debate. And I am John Baptiste, the moderator, and we have with us Andrew Stratelates.
Hey, everyone.
Josh Brister.
Hello.
And we have with us our guests from Atheist Alliance International, correct?
Yes.
Miss Elisabeth and
Elisabeth Christina.
And Secular World, I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
Yes, my name's John Richards, as I will explain in my video, which I'm about to play for you. Tell us when we're ready.
You can play the video whenever you want.
Yeah, okay. Right. So, share screen. Share entire screen. Click on video. Can you see that?
Yes.
Right, here we go, play. Hope you've got your sound switched on.
I see it. Yep.
Hello, I'm John Richards, Publications Director of Atheist Alliance International. Josh Brister challenged me to a debate some months ago, and during the course of our communications, this has moved from modern day debate, which is what I agreed to red pill religion, which is, as you probably know, a forthright Christian site. So having seen what goes on there, I set a certain number of conditions, and Josh and his seconder, Andrew Stratelates, have agreed, I've got it in writing by email, that they will behave as gentlemen, the debate will be respectful and aimed at getting at the truth. So given that assurance, I'm prepared to go ahead. And this debate is on the subject, Christianity versus atheism. Where does the evidence point? Well, the first thing we must do is define our terms. So what is atheism? Personally, I don't describe myself as an atheist because I don't wish to be associated with theists' misrepresentation of an atheist as an immoral, purposeless God-hater. I'm just a non-believer in God, and I consider theism to do more harm than good. So anti-theist better describes my activity. So what is atheism? Well, you need to ask yourself, do I believe in the tooth fairy? No? Then you should ask yourself, do I wish to please this tooth fairy that I don't believe in? Am I willing to die or to kill for my non-belief in the tooth fairy? Is my non-belief in the tooth fairy a belief system with values and principles? Your answers should be the same for atheism, which, like not believing in the tooth fairy, also has no requirement for worship and no doctrines. There is no more need for the word atheist than there is for a word a tooth fairyist. So we have just demonstrated that there is no such belief system as atheism, and also that atheism inspires no immoral, murderous, or genocidal maniacal behavior. But only a fool would pretend that the word atheist doesn't exist. Consequently, Atheist Alliance International has taken the position that probably impossible to abolish the word atheist, so we are working to detoxify it. The toxicity comes from the fact that theists like to misrepresent atheism as a belief system or ideology, and in their terms, it's an evil pseudo-religion. This is nonsense, of course, as the comparison with not believing in the tooth fairy has just revealed. It's simply stupid to base a belief system on not believing. So there is no such belief system as atheism. The next thing we must do is decide what we mean by evidence. Well, evidence is what is collected during an investigation. So let's ask ourselves what counts as evidence. Ideally, to be effective, evidence must be beyond question, beyond doubt. So that rules out anything that might include an opinion, because opinions are subjective. This means we can't accept anything that has been through someone else's brain, as that would have been tainted by their personal agenda or belief system. So that excludes witnessing, testimony, scripture, experience, intuition, and argument. We are left with observations. But to count as evidence, observations must be shareable, or we are left with the problem of wondering whether to believe an anecdotal report or not. And they must be repeatable, or we are left wondering whether the observation was a fluke or not. So, what is evidence? It's shareable, repeatable observations, nothing else. I frequently get involved with theists online who argue with me, and they claim that argument is evidence. It's not. Arguments consist of thoughts fashioned into a case to support a proposition. This happens inside heads, in the conceptual realm, along with Humpty Dumpty and all the other things that we can think of. So, although arguments can be good or bad, and strong or weak, they can't be right or wrong. They're just thoughts, just associations of ideas. They produce inferences, not conclusions. After all, they can be argued about. That's not to say that they don't have their uses. Argumentation is very good for conceptualizing, for making hypotheses, propositions that need testing, proposals that might explain a mystery. And they're also useful for designing the experiments that do the testing. But being just thoughts, arguments have limited usefulness. It's when we have no information that we have to resort to argument. And that's the only time it's useful. So experiments are investigations that are designed to test propositions. And the propositions may be in the form of arguments or claims or hypotheses or beliefs. The objective is to discover whether the proposition matches observations in the natural realm or not. I've included this table to help people distinguish between argument and evidence. So I'll leave it on the screen for a bit so you can read it. Guys, that was actually not the right video. I've added a bit to that video, which I would like to read to you now. And it should end with, so, Christianity versus atheism, where does the evidence point? And my statement is, I have yet to see any evidence for the Christian God. Maybe I will be shown some today. Until then, the sensible position is to remain skeptical and to ask Christians to substantiate their claims. Thank you.
I'd like to respond to that, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So I'm just going to take a moment to summarize what I believe you were communicating to make sure that I understand it correctly. So it sounds like you say that evidence is only observation, and that evidence is the only thing that we can be assured of for forming an orientation towards a proposition. Is that correct, or do you have a broader sense of evidence?
It's broadly correct. It's the only way we have of distinguishing silly ideas from realistic ones.
Okay.
Of course, all of us can feel free to believe anything we like, and we can believe in hypotheses too. For example, I might believe that my horse is going to win the race. It's a hypothesis. The race hasn't run yet. And you might believe that your horse has run the race. That's also a hypothesis. But these beliefs don't count for much. What counts is what happens in the race. And once the race has been won, we'll know the answer. And at that point, believing ceases to be useful. It's a fact.
So, just so I'm clear, you believe that the proposition evidence is the only way we have to tell correct ideas from false ideas. Do you believe that proposition is supported by evidence?
Yes, I do, because
Okay.
this is what we're talking about here is scientific method. And I believe that scientific method is itself evidential. And as an example to support that belief, I will point to this equipment that we are using, which is entirely the result of scientific discoveries applied by technology. So science works, basically.
Okay, so there are two issues that I see with this. One is that actually doesn't answer the question of whether evidence is the only way to come to true propositions. It instead gives an example of how science uses it, and apparently does, because it makes functional mechanisms that are technologies that work. So that in that sense, it actually doesn't answer the question of how do you know that science or this type of epistemic position is correct.
Well, that's a good question. What we have here is a contest between thoughts and actual external evidence. And I would contend that in all cases, external evidence trumps thinking. So the fact that we can't come up with any thoughtful justification for something doesn't cut the mustard if the evidence, the observations show that something is a fact.
Right, but then the question is, what evidence from the external world do you have that is the case?
Well, I just explained. This apparatus that we're using is evidence for the success and the suitability, the veracity, the veridity, one of those words, of scientific method. In other words, that observations provide the means of distinguishing between and sensible.
The issue there, though, is that our success in technology has another explanation, specifically that our technological prowess comes through a system of stochastic tinkering similar to evolution. And in that case, it doesn't actually matter whether our beliefs are true or not, just that we engage in enough low-cost experiments so that we gain from it. And in that sense, it actually doesn't matter if the external world produces true beliefs or not, or science does, but just whether it produces beliefs that foster the right behaviors for technological innovation.
Well, I don't see that as refuting my case or supporting yours.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
I said I don't see that as refuting my case or supporting yours.
Okay, so can you elaborate how you don't believe it refutes your case?
I'm surprised that it needs elaboration. I mean,
I'm sorry,
I'm
I'm really ignorant, so you'll have to bear with me. I clearly am not as intelligent as you are.
Oh, now this is the start. This is the thin end of a wedge, isn't it? Of
no, I'm dead serious. If it's obvious to you, I must be missing something.
Well, I wouldn't have said that you are any less intelligent than me. So please don't play that card.
Well, surely you can delineate the explanation of how science verifies itself.
I have. We're using it.
That's a pragmatic understanding of truth.
Yes.
Yeah, and in that case, then religion is pragmatically true. People find it useful.
Well, that's a matter of opinion, isn't it? I mean, you can't. The equipment that we're using here is not a matter of opinion. It's functional, it's working, and it's indisputable.
Is it your opinion that religion can't have a pragmatic truth element to it?
It can be a belief, but for it to become a truth, we would need to have some evidence. Do you have any?
But that's what we're looking for, is we're looking for evidence. And so far, it seems that your claim is resting on the opinion that science works, which does have a subjective element, right? Because the working of a system is based on human judgment and our perception of values. So oh, no, you don't believe that it's a pragmatic question of whether science works?
It can't be a matter of opinion, can it? I mean, you can see me and I can see your icon.
But you're trusting your cognitive abilities and your perceptual abilities for that. That's a belief that they're trustworthy.
Those are not matters of opinion. Those are matters of fact. And yes, I grant I could be a brain in a vat. I could be suffering from a delusion. I could be. The whole thing would be a dream. But isn't that a desperate ploy?
So your
Okay?
criteria for truth is common sense. Why can't we have a common sense Christianity?
No, my criteria for truth is not common sense. Common sense, I mentioned this in my video, it's intuition. Another word for common sense is intuition. And it's often been shown to fail. I mean, it's common sense to think that the sun goes around the earth, that iron ships will sink, and that a heavy stone will fall faster than a light one of the same dimensions.
Or that the external world exists. But you have a whole plethora of common sense notions that you take for granted in formulating a scientific understanding of the external world.
No, I have one assumption, that of materialism.
Well, that includes multiple assumptions, like the existence of causes, the general rationality of the world insofar as that our cognitive abilities are able to discern these causes, that our cognitive abilities are potentially reliable if we use them in the proper way.
Well, can I respond to that?
Sure.
Causality is evidential. Again, that's not a matter of opinion. Every effect has a cause. This has been observed. No counter observation has ever been made. Do you see where you're going now? Do you see that you are challenging me by doubting my equipment, which we could plug into the data stream? There is no. This is unquestionable.
It's a cause and effect. And
I'll answer that.
Assumption. It's that something can't come from nothing, or that every effect has to have a cause. No amount of experience will say that to you. In fact, where you're getting your argument is from David Hume in his Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding on page 173. That's called verificationism. Verificationism doesn't explain the whole myriad of reality. It doesn't explain objective truths or aesthetic truths or all different kinds of things. So I think you are philosophically naive in your understanding of what makes science true.
You're not the first person from your side of the fence who have called me philosophically naive, but I would like to point out that philosophy is thought. That's all it is. It happens in your head. This was in my video. And also in your head, all sorts of other thoughts happen, including the thought of Humpty Dumpty. How do we distinguish which of those thoughts are reasonable and which of those thoughts are unreasonable? I'll tell you. We look outside of our heads at the natural realm for observations that match or don't match. So we look outside of our heads, we don't see Humpty Dumpty, but we do see science working.
Well, the issue there is, let's say that we use the same thing with an animist, right? An animist believes that the fundamental reality is spiritual agents that control everything, right? And if you ask the animist, well, let's look at reality and see what happens, they would come to the same conclusion that you did, that they're all being controlled by these supernatural forces of spirits causing the different things and so forth.
I'm comfortable with that. If you want to compare yourselves to animists, that's fine by me.
But I'm not comparing myself to an animist. I'm comparing you to an animist.
Well, I'm the furthest it's possible to get from animism. What we're talking about there is a very primitive form of religion where, as you said, the volcano spirit was responsible for the eruption and the rain god was responsible for the rain. We've moved on. Why do you need so desperately to scrape up the remote past to defend your position? Give me some evidence for your God.
But we're trying to figure out exactly how evidence will change your fundamental worldview. And
we're critiquing yours.
And that's sort of the issue is, right? You said that you have one assumption, materialism. If you assume materialism, there's no evidence that I can give you that will get you out of that assumption.
Well, I've got plenty of evidence for materialism. That, you know, it's a phenomenon that we can observe in many different ways.
That's
There
a
are lots of
philosophical
different-
position of that you can trust
It's
your
actually not.
observable data.
But it's not a philosophical position, it's a pragmatic position. You look out of the window and you see the sun. There's nothing philosophical about that.
Well, doesn't it undercut your position if we say Christianity can have a pragmatic truth value to it? So if you're gonna interpret Hume truthfully and say cause and effect are just a bundle of perceptions, how will you ever get a cause out of that? In fact, that was what Thomas Reid says about David Hume, and this is what Thomas Reid says, the famous contemporary of David Hume. He says, and I quote, we see then that Mr. Hume's philosophy is very much like a hobby horse. When a man, when he is ill, can keep with him at home and ride to his contentment. But just in case he should bring it to the marketplace of ideas, his friends would quickly impanel a jury and confiscate his estates and have the solicitude never to leave him alone again. I don't think your view of science is reasonable or livable.
We're using quotes, I see, and appealing to the authority of
I tend to read.
past opinions. No, I'm sorry. Give me some evidence. I'm not really not really bothered about thoughts.
Well, so that's a fine request, but I have a request as well. Can you convince me that you are actually susceptible to good evidence?
Do I need to?
I think it would be a fair exchange if you want me to provide evidence for my position, that you provide evidence for yours. And your position is that you're convinced by evidence.
Yes. Okay. Well, you provide your evidence first, and then you can quiz me.
Okay. So you want?
Oh, wait a second. Wait. Maybe we should wait until we give our evidence when we give our presentations and continue critiquing yours, John.
Sure. Yes. You can do your presentations. We can do the questions and answers later.
So I thought it's my turn now because the guests can start. What about my argument?
All right.
Please do.
Thank you. So I just want to follow up on what John said in the video at the end, that if your God existed, if given that Christianity is true, that is the only one true religion on the planet, and the Bible is the word of a God, we would necessarily see evidence for this in the real world. We could look everywhere. We would see that God is real. So the thing is that we don't see that evidence. So my position,
that's an unwarranted assumption.
Do not interrupt me. I were promised to have 12 minutes, 10 minutes time to present my argument.
Right.
Thank you.
All right.
If prayer worked, we would necessarily see the limbs of amputees grow back, because people pray for that. People who are terminally ill, who have cancer, who have AIDS, whatever, who have a dying child, they all pray. But what we do see in reality is that prayer doesn't work. So the Templeton study that was funded by Christians could conclusively show in a methodologically correct scientific way that prayer doesn't work. It has no effect on the well-being of a person. The studies show quite the opposite, because those people who did not know that they were prayed for in the trial did actually worse than the people who did know that they were prayed for did actually worse than the people who didn't know that. So my premise first is, if the Christian God existed and Christianity was the only one true religion, we would necessarily see objective, clear, and unambiguous evidence that God exists and Christianity is true. The Bible is the word of God. Premise 2, we do not see this evidence. Conclusion, the Christian God does not exist. The Bible is fiction and Christianity is a purely man-made religion. So to demonstrate my point, I show you a chart. Just a second. Where is it now? Just a second, please. It's kind of gone. I had saved it. So here's my chart. Just a second. Screen share. So what you see here is a map of all the religions that we know of. So religion started, we can say it started 100,000 years ago, 100,000 BC, with what you said, animated religions, then polytheism religions. So we see around the world religion evolved. Here is Christianity, I circled it in red. So you clearly see it derived from Judaism. And before the scientific method was used to discover about our universe, to explore the universe and find answers about what is really there. So you can clearly see, I believe you Christians, you regard all these other religions of not being true and myth, but if you look at this, it clearly seems that Christianity is nothing more than another myth. Also, the question arises, what did your God take so long? I mean, he came on the scene of history like 2,000 years after the supposed death of Jesus. So, and we have the Old Testament. It was, why didn't the early Homo sapiens know about? Why didn't God tell them about Jesus? Why didn't God tell them about hell, all the other things the Bible states? So, another fact is that since the dawn of Christianity, you were not able to come even up with one single sound logical argument for your God. All your arguments, the best arguments you have are deist arguments. They are not even theist arguments. So if they convinced you, you must be a theist and not a Christian. Furthermore, the properties you Christians assign to God are varying, but what we can say when we look at the theist arguments, your God is usually, its properties is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, benevolent, perfect. He's the creator of the universe that also exists beyond time and space. So these properties cannot exist at the same time. This would render God impossible. So that means every God that is defined in a way of being omniscient or impotent is impossible in any possible reality. It's a logical impossibility, just like a square circle or a married bachelor. So you first have to show that your God is even possible to exist. Even if you have shown that, you still would need evidence in the outside world. So you would still have to show that prayer works, that Christianity is united, because that is what we have necessarily to see today. If the prayer of Jesus came true, who said in John 17:21, I pray for those who will believe in me, that all may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I in you, may they also be one in us, that the world may believe. If Christianity were true, we would see everyone being a Christian. What we do see is at least 33,000 different Christian denominations. Christianity is scattered. They cannot even agree on their most basic tenets. And what we also see is a bunch of other religions. So 2 billion people on the earth currently are Christians, but that means also that 6 billion people don't buy your claims. This should make you think. So prayer doesn't work. It doesn't. People of other religions also pray. They also have miracle claims. Their God does miracles. They claim their prayers have been answered, but it cannot be. If you see this as a valid argument, you also have to acknowledge the answered prayers of Muslims, of Hindus, of Buddhists, of Mormons. But you don't. You have a very low standard when it comes to your religion, but your standard is very, very high when it comes to the claims of different religions. So no matter where we look, we see a different picture than we would see if your God existed and your religion were true. Another chart I wanted to show you, just a second. So Christianity cannot be true. I cannot find my chart right now, but I can still go on with my argument. Nothing in the Bible points to divine authorship. It seems that the Bible was made up by humans who were ignorant, because, as I said, Christianity clearly comes before science. So the people had no means to know that germs cause diseases. They had no means to know that the universe consists of hundreds, billions of galaxies with hundreds of billions of stars in each galaxy. They didn't know basic facts, for example, that a bat is not a bird. The Bible people who believed the stories, they thought that a bat is a bird. We know today, thanks to science, that bats are mammals. So there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that is completely explainable, that is absurd, that is inconsistent, that is contradictory, but it can be completely be explained that these were humans who didn't know where the sun goes at night. They just hadn't the knowledge that we have today. So, and the fact alone that we're having this debate, so that Christianity relies on apologists, missionaries, early childhood indoctrination in order to stay alive and well, is evidence alone that it's a man-made thing. And what I really oppose is the harm it causes and has been causing since Constantine declared the official religion of the Roman Empire in 315. So it was forced by violence. If Christianity were true, we all would believe naturally. Your show would be eager to show us that he is real. But Christianity has 2 billion followers today because it was forced by violence. Forced conviction, the Inquisition, the witch hunts, the wars. It's division. It causes division. It doesn't cause unity. Or did Jesus lie? There is also a passage where Paul, in Corinthians 1:10, says, I appeal to you, brothers, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree with one another, that there may be no divisions among you. So not even Paul's prayer was answered. My conclusion: Christianity is a man-made religion like all the other approximately 1,400 religions. I have provided hard evidence for this claim that everyone can observe in various areas of our lives. Yeah, that's what I wanted to show. The life expectancy, the more religious a country is, the lower is the life expectancy. In Singapore, 18% are Christians, and in Zambia, 96% are Christians. So if prayer worked and Christianity were true, we would quite see a different picture. We would see the opposite. We don't. God doesn't exist, and the Bible is solely of human authorship. It's not only the best explanation for the lack of good evidence, it is the inevitable logical conclusion that every reasonable person who is concerned with the truth must draw. Christianity has failed to meet its burden of proof, which is always on the person making the claim. Therefore, atheism is the mere rejection of your claim. That's what atheism is. Of your claims, due to the lack of clear and good evidence on your side, is the most reasonable and justified default position to take when confronted with a God claim, including yours. So if you look at Islam or at Buddhism or at any other religion in the world, ask yourself the question: do you believe their God is real? And if no, why not?
So Elisabeth, Christina,
Yeah, just a second, I'm not finished. This is really my final thing. You need to connect the dots of the evidence you do really see and then make the correct conclusion. You do not do that. You have such a low standard that you say, oh, fuzzy warm feelings, oh, that's evidence, or I heard that, this person told me that, and his friend said that, and his mother was cured from cancer. You have a very, very low standard. But when it comes to other religions' claims, you reject them. You even reject a different denomination of your own religion. Why is that?
So you've said a lot. What thing would you like me? What do you think is the strongest part of the points that you made?
The strongest point, I can just summarize my point. Due to the evidence that we must necessarily we have to see this evidence if your claims are true. We do not see this evidence. So in this case, absence of evidence is evidence of absence. Correct? So my monkey
Okay,
under
so
the
you
bed,
believe that's the strongest
yes,
part of your
it's
argument.
lacking. It's
That
nothing. And
evidence
that's
is
why we're
lacking.
atheists, because there's no valid, good evidence that John was talking about and that you clearly could read in his video. This is what we expect to see. This is what we define as evidence. It's not anecdotal. It's not hearsay. It's not warm, fuzzy feelings. It's not because the Bible says so. It's not because all these things that's lame. And your best logical arguments you have are flawed. You literally have nothing. So why do we even have this debate? If you really
Okay.
had clear, hard, unambiguous evidence, as John pointed out, we wouldn't have sit here and have the debate. It's that
But
easy.
that's not
Okay,
the
are you
strongest
ready?
point you have, right? The
Of course, it's
strongest
my
is
strongest
that
point.
the strongest point is that there's not evidence. There is not sufficient evidence to believe in God.
Yeah, and
Correct.
I just gave you examples of what we necessarily would have to see, but we don't see that. So you just have to draw the
Okay.
right conclusion, but you don't. You really have to see the hard reality out
Would
there.
you like me to respond, or do you have more to say?
I'm finished by now.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about belief and taking propositions as true. Do you believe that I have a mind?
I do not have to believe that you have a mind because I know it that you have a mind. It's out
Okay.
there. It's measurable.
So how do you know that I have a mind?
Excuse me, you're talking with me. So it's the theory of mind. I have a mind, and you do know the theory of mind. I acknowledge other people having a mind because they think the same, similar things. They act in similar ways. I know that I'm not the only one
Right.
having a mind. I'm
Right.
just kind of
So you make an induction that based on the fact that I am able to communicate with you, that I do these things that you use your mind to do, that I also have a mind, and that, let's say we found an octopus from an extraterrestrial planet, and it was able to like communicate with us. We would also say that that thing probably has a mind because it was able to communicate with us. And so one of the things that we actually have, and you can look at the biology for this, is we have a preconception of other people having minds and things that talk having minds. And so it's a combination of this preconception that's actually in our biology and the observations together that come together in this knowledge that other people have minds. And a similar thing happens with our belief in causes. Certain mathematical things have this similar basis. Go ahead.
First, you have to define what you mean by belief. I tell you what I mean by belief and what the difference
To
between
take a
belief and
proposition
knowledge.
as true.
You wanted to talk about belief, so we have to be clear on the terms first, because otherwise the discussion has no sense. Belief is a subset. Knowledge is a subset of belief, right? Belief means a low level of confidence that something is true. Let's call it X. That X is true. Let me finish. And knowledge is a very firm belief, a very because we have evidence that this is really there, then we do not say we believe it, we say we know it, right? So if you say you believe something, you already admit that you have a low level of confidence. So you are quite sure, but not so sure. So you're not very sure, right? So, so what does the talk about belief has to do with my argument?
Well, thank you for defining that, because part of the issue of being a former Greek skeptic is I use words in a sort of a jargony way. So when I say belief, I mean the taking of a proposition as true. So knowledge is when you take a proposition as true, that proposition is actually true, and you have warrant or justification for doing so.
Can I come in here?
Sure.
Yep.
The definition of belief that you've given, taking a proposition to be true, is a sort of common or garden dictionary definition of belief. Now, if you go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, you'll find that the definition they give says an attitude towards a proposition,
Mhm.
it doesn't mention truth. And if you take
Mhm.
what the ancient Greeks had, they actually had two words for belief. They had pistis
Yes.
for propositions that you could be confident were correct, that matched observations, and they had doxa for opinions which have been accepted by the population. So
Yeah.
my
Mhm.
contention would be that belief should only be, since we only have one word in English, belief should only be used for the soft doxa meaning, for things which are not certain, for things which are contentious, which are argued about, unlike, for example, the proposition that I will fall if I jump off a roof. Nobody argues about that. You don't get drunks in a pub fighting each other about whether they will float or fall. That's a pistis. It's, in modern terms, it's a known. And I would contend that knowns are beyond belief. They do not require the consideration, the mental action that enables you to discern whether or not to believe something. They are just known. So that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for belief, they're opinions. And
So
their choices.
let me know when you're done.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say that their opinions and their choices, I can choose to believe something. I can choose to believe that coffee is nice without sugar, and it's of no value. But I can't choose to float upwards when I jump off a roof. There's the difference. So what we are looking for here, we're not really interested in what you believe, because that's monumentally unimportant. We're seeking the truth of whether your God exists or not.
Well, hold on.
These
We're talking
are
about belief,
the
right?
evidence.
And the historic definition is justified true belief. That is all the way
No, it's
from
not
the
historic.
Greeks.
It's Socrates. It's from Plato. It's from Plato and Socrates. Yeah.
From the
Okay,
Greeks.
so
It's a Platonian definition.
Yes,
yeah,
from
and
the
I'm a
Greeks, and that's a
Platonist.
historical
There is no historical
understanding.
definition.
Well, see, what y'all are arguing from is something called meta-epistemological skepticism, which says a belief or knowledge or a proposition has to correspond in a one-to-one relationship that is something observable and something we can know with
Okay.
certainty. And you
Okay.
get that from Godfred Frege.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's
Then
an unlivable
yeah. Then
viewpoint.
let me ask a question. When you say that, then give me the justification for your belief. What is the justification that you believe that the Christian God exists, or that the Bible is real, and that Christianity is the only true religions of every religion that have ever been
Yeah.
there on the planet?
Well,
Well, how do you justify that?
I wanted to go through some of the things that you mentioned. And I took notes. For example, you said in John 17:21, Jesus prays that we could be one. We are one if you accept him, if you believe in him. The 33,000 denominations, C.S. Lewis goes over this in Mere Christianity. There's a big subset of Christians believing the fundamental doctrines like the resurrection of Jesus, the belief in God, the nature of sin, etc. A lot of these other things you said, like religion started 100,000 years ago, that's a textbook fallacy.
It's not a textbook fallacy. You know why? Because no.
Let me finish. It's a textbook fallacy of something called the genetic fallacy, to show that how or when a belief originated is not therefore to show that it's false. Of course, we know that religion has a historic development, but so does atheism. John, you like to read certain quotes. I do want to read a professional atheist quote from you, Cal Neeson. This is what he says about the. Hold on, let me just finish this.
Well, you've got me wrong there, because I don't go for quotes. So that's a mistake.
Well, didn't you quote the dictionary or the encyclopedia?
Okay, the encyclopedia, the dictionary.
This is on. This is relevant.
Of
This,
well,
hold on. Just as relevant. This is on the burden of proof on belief and what atheists say. This is what Kel Neeson, a professional philosopher, says. To show that an argument is invalid or unsound is not to show that the conclusion of the argument is false. All the proofs of God's existence may fail, but it still may be the case that God exists. In short, to show that the proofs do not work is not enough by itself. It may still be the case that God exists. And that's from Kel Neeson's Reason and Practice, one of the most famous professional atheists.
Can I respond to that? I've got a number of responses I'd like to come back to you with. First of all,
atheist philosopher.
Yeah, so you say. But you won't find me quoting atheist philosophers or atheist scientists or atheist anybody. I'm not interested. I'm not impressed by other people's opinions. I'm only impressed by evidence.
Yeah.
So that's what you need to give me is actual evidence. Now, I'd like to know, you quoted the Bible. I'd like to know, why do you think that's a reliable source of information?
Oh, I was responding to an out of context mention of John 17:21. Certainly, when someone takes something out of context, you would like to go to the original source. But I wanted to say, you also, by not reading the contemporary sources in literature, it almost seems that you take a scientism of the gaps approach, John.
No, because you know what? Because I made this argument because I was talking about the prayer thing. I was talking about that even the Bible promises that prayer works. I even said my argument was that even Paul prayed. We do not see unity. And of course, if Islam were the correct religion, and if I would debate a Muslim today, I would say the same. Of course,
maybe your understanding of that verse,
everyone would believe the same. My point was that not everyone believes the same, and that indicates strongly that your religion is made up like all the others. That's all that I would say.
I would like to respond
and that's a fact.
I would like to respond to that, please.
All right.
So, Elisabeth, Christina, do you believe that human psychology exists? That we have like a mind, right?
It exists. Yeah. We know that we have a mind. We know that we have a brain. We know that people have feelings. We feel things. We know all these things, and they're measurable. So I have no problem with a mind, and I have no problem with love.
That's right. But there are many different models of how the mind works and how the brain works. The fact that there are many different perspectives on one real phenomena doesn't mean that each one of those perspectives is either totally wrong or totally true, or that phenomena doesn't exist.
Exactly.
The fact that there's Freudian psychology and system psychology and rational behavior therapy doesn't mean that the human mind doesn't exist or that all of them are false. The plurality of views doesn't mean that all of the views are false or that they're all made up.
You are correct, but the difference is that a mind, as you just said, belief is in a mind. A mind is thinking. But when it comes to a God claim, when it comes to any claim, you need to see evidence in the outward, commonly shared reality. That means when we stand together around a tree in a park, we all can agree how big the tree is, what color the leaves have, what species the tree is, how big it is.
You haven't talked to very many people into trees, have you?
I'm talking about objectively, independently confirmed things that really exist in our commonly shared reality. I'm not talking about minds. We know already people make stuff up all the time. People claim that they're abducted by aliens. Do you buy the claim? They're witnesses. Do you buy the claim?
I believe that they had a very significant psychological experience. I don't believe that they were abducted by extraterrestrials.
Oh, yeah, see, it's the same thing. And why don't you believe that? Why don't you believe that they were actually?
Because I have a more coherent explanation with my. I have a more coherent explanation.
No, because you have no evidence, right?
I thought we were talking
You
about
want to have evidence for any other claim except your religion's claim. You want to see hard evidence. You want to see hard evidence for leprechauns, for Loch Ness monster, poltergeists, unicorns, whatever. But interestingly, when it comes to your religion,
Would you like to hear my thoughts on evidence in Christianity?
no, I want to see the evidence.
Okay.
This is all we just want to see from you guys. It's
So
hard, as what John said, hard, unambiguous, valid evidence, or at least give me a sound argument.
Well, hold on.
Argument
John,
for your God.
John,
You can't do
John,
that. That's why you're
while ago,
distracting to quotes and stuff.
John, a while ago, said he would only accept observable, measurable evidence.
You can see this evidence.
Any historical evidence that we give, and historians work this way. They try to use inference to the best explanation. No matter what the evidence would give, y'all would simply try to explain away the evidence. That's why I think theism is on a far better epistemological vantage point than atheism, because we can choose either a naturalistic or supernaturalistic
but you cannot even define your God. We have to be clear on the terms first of God, because
we can actually
have a discussion. Okay,
but you
what's the properties
but
of
you keep on interrupting me before I'm able to articulate anything.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
Thank you. I'll be sure to give you a term, but well, there are a couple issues that you've brought up that I would like to correct. First of all, the bats and birds thing is due to a specific phrase in the King James Bible. In Elizabethan English, there wasn't an English word, and there still isn't, for all just flying things, which was what the original Hebrew and Greek was. The closest, and this is before modern taxonomy occurred, was bird was used for just flying thing. So the fact that piece of folk etymology of the English language got put into a translation of the Bible doesn't show that the Bible is inaccurate or wrong, just that the meanings of words.
How do you know that? Because we don't have originals. We only have fragments of the originals. How do you know that?
Surely.
What was in the original Bible? We don't have any original Bible.
No.
We know we know the scripture that they translated from.
Yeah, and there's a lot of mistranslations there. For example, virgin is not the Hebrew word is the Hebrew word of a young woman. There is nowhere it says virgin, so we can go on.
It depends on whether you're using the LLX, the Septuagint, or the Masoretic text.
Yeah, that's okay, but we can go on for hours now to debate the Bible. This is not what I was trying to do. I was just giving one example of many, because I don't have the time to go really into detail, because I could talk like weeks about this.
And I gave two reasons why those examples were false.
Okay, and there it's talking about six-legged insects with 6 legs, for example, too, or that mental diseases are caused by demons. I mean, there's literally a lot of things that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and so there are two possibilities. There are two possible.
We would expect.
Do you want me to speak or not?
To sense if really a God was involved. Yes, thank you.
So there are two possibilities, right? If something doesn't make sense, like if you talk to me and I don't understand what you're saying, the general you, the possibility is they are saying nonsense, or there's some lack in me that I'm not able to understand it, right? And so that's one of the questions when it comes to these religions that you seem very dismissive of. And I don't dismiss these religions, and I believe that there's much truth in all of them. And I would actually assert that the God of Islam is an imperfect understanding of the God of Christianity, and the same is true of all these religions.
Yeah, you need to demonstrate your claims. You cannot just pull out a claim and then I do not dismiss other religions. I'm just
okay, you want me to demonstrate how I don't dismiss other religions?
No, I said You cannot just make a claim. You have to demonstrate the claim. So when
What
you
claim would you like me to
you
demonstrate?
implied the claim that all religions like have a common yeah, it's Christianity, but it's the other way around. Christianity evolved from earlier religions, and as I showed you on the chart, it is an evolution, like the evolution of language or the evolution of the biological evolution. It branches off, it evolves, but not because all of a sudden God came in after 2,000 years, after 200,000 years, after Homo sapiens or longer, and all of a sudden the real God comes on the scene. It's unlikely. It's you also have to ask what is probably
one of the things that we
that
have to keep in mind is there is such a thing as natural religion and natural revelation. There are aspects of the supernatural world and God that are available to everyone through their perceptions and use of reason. There are, for example, no, you deny that that's possible?
Look, that's what you're doing. You put out another claim, supernatural. Demonstrate the supernatural. No one was able
Okay, what do you
demonstrate.
mean by natural? By supernatural, I mean
No,
the fundamental ultimate reality
No.
that exists under the material realm.
Let me
That
go
there is a
back.
Okay.
You were the one talking about supernatural. I never used the word. You make the claim.
Sure, and that was my
supernatural
mistake, and I apologize. I will unpack that term now.
A supernatural realm, and then you go from there, and it's a part of your premise. But you first have to demonstrate that supernatural realm exists.
You know, I disagree. When historians or scientists are working, and when they are trying to seek the cause of something like, let's say, Mount Rushmore or arrowheads, they see that it's analogous to seeing intelligent agents design them. They don't therefore throw up their hands and say, oh, before you can say that, you have to get a cause of what caused the people who created the Mount Rushmore and arrowheads. I think what you're doing is a fundamental mistake and a logical error.
No,
Can I
it's
come
not.
in here?
No, it's not.
Can I come in and have a word about this, please?
Sure.
Actually, before I finish, Richard Dawkins does the same thing, and it's been pointed out time and time again. What say you, John?
Well, I wanted to address a couple of points here, but let's focus on historians and history. The thing about history is it isn't such a strong, verified subject as science. But historians do the best they can. And for example, we know pretty much what went on in the Tudor court because we found love letters, diaries, shopping lists, recipes. We found lots of different sources of documents that corroborate each other. You don't have that for the Bible. All you have is the one Bible. There are no independent alternative sources that support it.
Yeah, see, that's a straw man. If I'll come in, I often hear skeptics bring up the Bible as one source when Christians point to it. That's not what Christians are doing. The Bible is an anthology of 27 documents that were put into combined. But these are individual documents, each with different traditions that predate the individual books.
But if I can respond to that now, granted that the various books of the Bible were written by a number of different authors, some of them, although the Gospels are likely all written, or 2 or 3 of the Gospels are likely all to have been written by one man. And of course, they weren't written by the disciples, they're only according to.
Can you give a source for that? Because I've never heard that.
Really? Oh, you want to try?
Yes, really.
Yeah, okay. I can certainly give you a source. I'm not sure whether I'll be able to bring it to my Dan. Is it not Dan Barker?
I hope not, because I debated Dan Barker.
Did you? Yes, he's a great guy, isn't he? A musician too. Anyway, I will.
Funny guy.
Yeah, I will make sure you. I will make sure you get the source that I'm trying to think of. Still not coming to mind. But the point is, although several books, you numbered them, didn't you, are in the Bible. It's not just one source in that sense, but it's one source in the sense that it wasn't until the 4th century that it was edited into the compendium that it is.
That's
So-
wrong. Tertullian in the 2nd and 3rd century mentions almost all of the books, and so does Irenaeus mentions a lot, and so does other 2nd and 3rd century Christian authors.
There were fragments brought together before, but it was Constantine's instruction when he wanted to adopt Christianity as their state religion that caused the Bible to actually be edited. And
Constantine never made it official. That was a later emperor. That's one historical fact. I'm a history teacher, by the way.
Yes, I know that, and I know that Constantine died before his work, this Bible compiling work, had been finished, and so on and so forth. But the point I wanted to make is that history is. We have a historian here who's had a series on BBC TV, and he says that history is the stuff of legend, of myth, and it's been glamorized. That we've had some exposures on BBC again about the myths of British history. There was no Robin Hood. King Canute did not try and get the waves to go back. There was no round table. King Arthur didn't burn the cakes. These are all attractive myths. And the point about history is nobody will read it unless it's fun to read.
What you're talking about, John, with all due respect, is a movement at the beginning of the 20th century. It was about ending then. It's called the religio historical movement. It died out. Let me read to you A.N. Sherman White. For the New Testament of Acts, the confirmation of historicity is overwhelming. Any attempt to reject its basic historicity, even in matters of detail, must now appear absurd. Roman historians have long taken it for granted. This view that you're taking the Gospels and the New Testament as myth and unreliable, that's an out-of-fashion view that's almost a century old at this point.
I'm not impressed by fashion. And you said taking it for granted. That's an opinion. So, and I also want to point out that
it's as a professional historian, John.
It doesn't matter who said that. It's an argument from authority. You still need evidence to demonstrate your point. I mean, I can go on and quote atheists all day long.
We're not interested in people. We're interested in evidence.
We want to see evidence from you. Since this debate started, you haven't given us a piece.
Not a shred.
I think the only type of evidence you would take is the type that's observable and measurable.
The same evidence you want to see when a Muslim says his religion is true, or a Buddhist or a Hindu.
In history, we don't deal with that type of evidence.
No, because you have a low standard. You are not the same. You think evidence is evidence for your religion, what would never be evidence for a different religion, because you reject it.
There's good philosophical reasons
Otherwise,
to reject a lot of these. For example,
so
Islam
I'm starting to lose my voice. So let's go ahead and start wrapping it up.
Well, does anybody have anything? Any last thoughts?
Wait.
Go ahead.
I have given my 10 minutes, and I think we're okay. I want to give my 10 minutes and then have an open discussion. Okay. I guess we can start. And this is specifically to John and Elisabeth and the Atheist Alliance International. In August 8th, 1966, Time magazine an issue with the question, "Is God dead?" on its cover.
Yes,
but just as Time had raised the issue of God's existence in light of the supposed death of God, which was a movement then, and which pronounced God altogether dead that same year, a remarkable change took place. Merely a few months later, a few years later, Time ran on its cover, "Is God coming back to life?" Now, during the last quarter century, a remarkable revolution has occurred in American philosophy. This change has been so noteworthy that even the popular media observed. In an article entitled "Modernizing the Case for God," published in April of 1980, Time magazine commented, and I quote, in a quiet revolution in thought and argument that hardly anybody could have foreseen only 2 decades ago, God is making a comeback. Most intriguingly, this is happening not among theologians or ordinary believers, but in the crisp intellectual circles of academic philosophy, which the consensus has long banished the Almighty from fruitful discourse. And Quentin Smith, a professional, perhaps either him or Dr. Graham Oppy, the most sophisticated atheist philosophers, he has said, God is not dead in academia. He returned to life in the late 1960s and is now alive and well in his last academic stronghold, philosophy departments. There's also been a revolution in New Testament research. So let me finish up. Thomas Morris, a philosopher, comments in his book "Philosophy in the Christian Faith." He has studied the New Testament research. What is particularly interesting about the references theologians make to Kant or to Hume, and this goes to you, John, since you're using a lot of David Hume's arguments, is that more often we find philosophy merely mentioned, but we rarely, if ever, see an account of precisely which arguments of his, that is Hume, is supposed to have accomplished the alleged demolition of the Bible. In fact, I must confess to never having seen in the writings of any contemporary theologian the exposition of a single argument from either David Hume or Immanuel Kant or any other historical figure for that matter, which comes anywhere near to demolishing historic Christian doctrines or theological realism. Now, at the first of this debate, John and Elisabeth, I read a quote from Thomas Reid. Thomas Reid was perhaps the most well-known opponent of David Hume's arguments. And of course, John, you reference Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding. I don't know if you knew that, but that's one of the works you're referencing. Thomas Reid says we can know all these things, causality, the belief that the external world exists, that we have other minds, these properly basic beliefs based on common sense. So we can't merely have a verificationist view of reality where we say that for something to be true, it must be verified by the 5 senses. That's an empirical standard with which we do not live by. We have to look at all the evidence, and for something to be true, it must meet different lines of evidence. Christianity, unlike atheism, philosophically competent and understandable. Now, I tried to reply to all of your arguments, and so did Andrew. I don't think we have any reason for being skeptical of Christianity, but we do have
a lot of reasons. Wow.
But we do have reasons to be skeptical of atheism. I'll stop there.
Well, yes, please stop. Because you keep talking.
Stop. Can I say one single sentence, please? You do not know what atheism is, right? Atheism is not a religion, or is not on the same footing, because it's the rejection of your claims, nothing else. The same way you reject Zeus, Odin, Shiva, Dionysos, all the other gods people ever believed in. And when you understand why you reject these gods, you will understand why we atheists reject yours. It's so simple. I don't know why you just don't get it. Why don't you see that?
I for one don't reject Zeus.
I can quote Richard Dawkins all this a day long. It's an appeal to authority again. You have still not provided a single shred of
I
any
quoted
evidence.
Richard.
But
I quoted
according
Richard
to
Dawkins
the
myself
topic, the
in
Christianity is true.
I
You
quoted
just couldn't
Richard
do it.
Dawkins myself in his lack of historical understanding, but I'll let Andrew go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, so I guess the things that I haven't talked about yet that I want to get through is one of the differences between piste and doxa in the Greek understanding is the difference between a proposition that only has sort of intellectual use or use in thought versus one that's embodied in one's life. And doxa is really interesting because you said that was opinion. But doxa, especially in Church Greek, actually evolved to mean glorification. And it is not just opinion, but it is putting one's skin in the game for the action that one takes. And this is the fundamental thing that all religions attempt to do is to attempt to explain and provide a map of reality, not as a set of objects to be analyzed, which is what science does, but as a arena for action. And it's a category error to look at any religion as a analysis of objects and breaking them down rather than as a analysis of the arena of action of life.
You know what the problem is, Andrew, that you still haven't given even one single argument for why anyone should believe Christianity is true. Anyone should take the Bible as a word of a God and believe your religion. Why?
So I have worked very carefully about my beliefs. I believe I am correct. If I am incorrect, please point out the error, because I would like to know of any errors that I've made.
I don't know if you listened to my argument that I was making. I provided evidence that Christianity is man-made because we do not see the evidence. We would necessarily have to see if Christianity is true. We do not see this evidence, and in this case, as I said, the absence of evidence is evidence of absence in this case because it's just not there. And
let's go to that.
God doesn't exist. Your God is the properties assigned to your God. Such a thing cannot exist. So before we go into a discussion about your book or other religions, we need to define what you mean by God. What's his properties? What's his characteristics?
Sure.
Things we know
characteristics
of things like my glass here because they exist. We can measure them. We can say what color it has. Is it solid? Is it liquid? Because it exists. We can agree on a definition, but we cannot agree. You cannot agree on the definition of your God, which is most likely because he doesn't exist. Non-existent things are undefinable.
So you're making the same mistake you made earlier, that disagreement about something like the definition of what are the parts of the human mind doesn't mean that the human mind doesn't exist.
But it does mean that if your God existed, you would agree on a definition of God. So
no, it doesn't, because agreement is not a necessary condition for existence.
If something exists,
then the human mind doesn't exist because no one agrees on what the human mind is.
You bring something into an argument which has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
so here's the argument form that you're using.
Reality,
people have different.
And you're talking about the definition of God, and please define
let me know when you're
God.
done.
What
Elisabeth,
can your God do?
Elisabeth, you gotta let Andrew talk.
The form of the argument you're making is there are multiple positions or views of something X, and these views disagree. Therefore, X does not exist.
No, this is not what I was saying. You didn't understand my argument. I was saying everything we know, everything that exists can be defined. I can be, as an example, I can define my coffee cup. Everyone, no matter if it's one person or if I have 1 million witnesses to this coffee cup, me holding this, I'm sure everyone who sees that video sees that. We can see that there's a bird. We can see the color. We can see, it's
not if you're blind.
There. Yes, But there's also, if your claims are true, claims that are subject to science and then that are proved to be false. For example, the
Sure,
story
but you
of
believe
Adam
many
and
things
Eve.
that aren't
There's
subject to
never
science.
been a fall of man.
You believe that
There's never been a fall of man. Why do you need Jesus?
Elizabeth, before we go into following man and Jesus,
stop interrupting her. Let her finish, and then Andrew will go.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, are you?
Yeah. Just do you understand my argument now? I'm saying we're lacking the evidence that must necessarily be there. Like when you claim there was a rabbit running in the snow from A to B, I necessarily have to see traces in the snow. Do you understand that? I have to see the traces of the animal, and I can conclude, I can deduct from the size of the traces even what animal walked over the snow. But if I claim an ice bear was walking over the snow in my garden, you would necessarily want to see evidence because it must be there. You would see the footsteps, big footsteps from an ice bear in my garden. If you do not see this evidence, you have no good reason to believe that an ice bear walked through my garden. Do you understand what I'm talking about? And this, do you understand now what I'm talking about?
Well, let me try to articulate what I hear you saying, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
That God is an object or a thing, and that all things have we can perceive things through our senses, and that is the necessary and sufficient condition to believe that a thing is here or exists.
What else do you have? What else? On what grounds do you believe? What would be the better alternative?
Well, there are a couple different alternatives, right? So one example is trusting people that are trustworthy to give correct testimony, right? So
That's a very low standard.
So if your friend says that there's a rabbit in their yard, or your friend says, I need to drive to the hospital, you're not going to believe them unless they show you that they have cancer before you drive them to the hospital.
Of course, you can say I trust, but when it comes to things that must necessarily exist in the real world and that must necessarily be seen and observed in the real world, and they are not there, then it is unreasonable to conclude the thing is there.
Okay. Do you believe that democracy exists?
Democracy, it's a word we give to a certain it's just a word that we use to describe a certain political political party, or that people are allowed to vote. Democracy does not exist as, of course, as a being or an object. I'm saying, I know where you're going to, where you want to go to, but I'm talking about the claims in the Bible and that you make that are subject to science and have demonstrably could be shown to be not true, to be false.
You're making unreasonable analogies, Andrew.
Okay, how so?
Democracy is not analogous to God. Neither is a cancer patient needing to go to hospital.
Well,
what we're talking about here
is your argument
is evidence or not for the existence of a supposed being. Give it.
So the explanation that I'm giving is this. We all agree that Christianity requires certain actions from people that profess the Christian faith. The question is, fundamentally, whether Christians are justified in taking those actions or not. And in that sense, it is actually legitimately analogous to a person asking you to do something. And of course, it varies, right? My best friend saying I need to drive to the hospital is going to get a different action than someone who is a stranger, has a large machete, and is covered in blood, saying that they need to go to the hospital.
Absolutely, Andrew. Can I say something? There's several ways of evidence, of course. If I say, as you said, when a good friend of mine comes to me and says, "Hey, I have cancer, can you drive me to the hospital? I'm very worse. So we know the person who makes the claim exists. At least we know of other people having cancer and having to be driven to the hospital. We know all these things exist, right? When I do make the claim I have a car in my garage, you would of course believe me. When I say I have a Porsche in my garage, you would maybe have not so many reasons to believe me because you know I don't have the money. If I say I have a spaceship in my garage, you would be very, very skeptical, and you would be justified to be skeptical because that's an extraordinary claim. What you were making this analogy to is just not an extraordinary thing. But
well, and this is
over water, God performing miracles, prayer working, we must see a stark difference between Christians praying and Muslims praying or
This
Hindus
is an
praying.
atheistic
We do not
mantra.
see this evidence. We do not see that difference. So
so,
what
so
makes Christianity outstanding, and how can you possibly determine it to be true when there is no reliable and repeatable evidence?
So I love your example of the Porsche. I think that you're exactly correct, and it illustrates a very important point. My lack of belief that you have a Porsche is actually caused by my belief that you don't have $1 million or a lot of money, and to hold a lack of belief.
I could have stolen it. I could have
Right,
stolen it.
but I also
bank
believe that
yesterday.
you're a law-abiding person. So
Being given it.
well, yeah, and but I also have a belief that she doesn't have any friends or people that would give her gifts that have that amount of money.
How do you know you don't know my friends? I have many rich friends that are millionaires.
Just a random belief.
But
You've got no
so you're now arguing that you're claiming to have a Porsche.
No, I just said you cannot know that I don't have a Porsche because I don't have the money because someone
With
could
all
have
due
given it
respect,
to me,
let
or my
Andrew
dad could have
finish.
given. You cannot know that, and therefore you cannot just exclude that I don't have a Porsche because I don't have the money. You're jumping to a conclusion.
You can't exclude that God exists just because you don't know the evidence for it.
Yeah, and you don't know either because we have.
I don't. How do you know that?
Yes, because we never demonstrated the existence of any God. No one knows what a God will look like, and so no one can define a God, and so no one can say anything about this. But all you have is faith. You just believe it, right? But you have
I find it really amusing when people articulate things that they think my position is without even like examining what my actual position is. So thank you for amusing me.
But what I can say, Andrew, is that you believe in the God of the Bible, right? Correct? Is this what I can say?
I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, who is described in the creeds and the Bible and in the church.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, a lot of the ways that we talk about God are affirmed by Muslims, they're affirmed by Native Americans, they're affirmed by African animists, and so on and so forth. So it's not like we're at total odds with each other when it comes to natural theology.
But we know also from neuroscience, and we know from evolutionary psychology how religion evolved and why it evolved, because our brain is pattern seeking. We seek patterns and see agents everywhere.
Right, but that's a general defeater.
We can now explain why these things happened and why religions probably evolve into what we see today. It is because humans, we're curious beings. We want to have answers to questions. But people
then we create evolutionary psychology, which provides the answers, but doesn't actually correspond to truth, and therefore fulfills the human necessity to create explanations, even if they're not true.
And these explanations were God. Why is there?
So you see that's a defeater against all thoughts, not just religious thoughts, but all thoughts, including scientific ones.
Elisabeth, have you heard of Alvin Plantinga's evolutionary argument against naturalism? Because I think it's really pertinent. It would undercut your own atheism.
Excuse me, because talking about assumptions about what I believe, I say again, I do not believe your claims due to insufficient evidence. That's why I'm an atheist. You can also call me agnostic atheist because I can make a logical argument that I say, I know that your God doesn't exist, but that would be a little bit too much for today. That's all.
The
That's the
honorable,
only reason why I'm an atheist, and it's clear to me. It is obvious. It should be obvious to everyone who connects the dots and see what I brought examples were, that your God is imaginary and that your religion is a human, a man-made thing that was used in the beginning to explain things.
But do you remember how I replied to you, Elisabeth?
That's what we see.
Elisabeth, I replied to you by saying you created the textbook genetic fallacy by showing how or where a belief originated and therefore to showing it wrong. Now, remember when I
No. I have not shown it wrong because of where it originated. I say I'm an atheist because I do not see the evidence that must necessarily be there if you were correct.
All right. Do you remember when I quoted Kel Neeson, a professional atheistic philosopher? That absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Yes, usually not. But in your case, it is. In your case, it is, and I explained it two times why it is.
Let me finish. Absence of evidence is evidence of absence. If what does exist, we would expect there to be more evidence. Now, the evidence that me and Andrew supplied, from which I read Time magazine, and the dramatic shift within a few years after that, is the evidence from the beginning of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe, the presence of objective moral values, and the resurrection of Jesus. We've heard no undercutting defeaters for any of those. So why should we be an atheist?
Can I have a word here?
Absolutely, John.
Thank you. Fine-tuning is a question. Is there anybody here who thinks that questions are answers? Hands up. Nobody.
Well, I don't understand how it's a question.
But it's because we don't know why it is the case. But what you can't do, I mean, take this example. Do you think that your great-great-great-great-grandfather had it in mind to produce you as a descendant when he impregnated your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother? That's a crazy proposition, isn't it?
That's a silly question, John. You're not dealing with the evidence for design.
Can I explain why I have said that?
Sure.
It's because it's a silly proposition to propose retrospective intention. We cannot look into the past and say, therefore, this was meant to happen. That can't be done.
That's not what theists are doing when they use the design argument. We're using specified complexity that gives the mere possibility for the evolution of life in the initial conditions of the universe.
It's the same with fine-tuning. We can't say, because we don't know how this happened, therefore God done it. That doesn't work.
But don't you have a scientism of the gaps when you say the only evidence you'll accept is evidence that is observable and measurable? That very statement, that very criteria is not itself observable or measurable.
No, it's not in the conceptual realm, but in a posteriori, we know that it works because we're using internet-connected computers.
Well, now we're back to the pragmatic view. Why can't Christianity have a pragmatic truth value? And I think Andrew gave not only that, but an undercutting defeater from the Alvin Plantinga's evolutionary argument against naturalism.
Yeah, I've been looking for I've got a table on naturalism, on dualism, on the idea that there are two realms. And I can't find the table, unfortunately, but I've been trying to. I would put it on screen if I had. Maybe at our next debate I will. But as far as I can remember, the table says that we can think of two realms and we can produce evidence for a natural realm. But we can't produce evidence for a supernatural realm.
But listen to this, John. The atheist has only one option. That is a naturalistic explanation for any historical phenomenon. The Christian has two options, either
Yes.
a naturalistic or a gentle cause, the
That's
cause
not
of
true.
a free agent. So it
Yes.
seems to me, just on philosophical common sense grounds, that the Christian is on a far better epistemic in an
Well, thank you,
epistemic
Josh.
position.
No,
Thank
it's
you, Josh.
not.
Let me
It's
get back
not.
to you on that. This is between me and
So,
Josh. Let me just get back to you on that, Josh. You say that you have two realms and I only have one. Well, I say that why not? Why don't you have three? Eh? What will be wrong with my natural realm, your supernatural realm, and a super duper natural realm? Eh? Come on, you can imagine that, can't you? The same way you imagine the supernatural realm?
Answer. The definition of God is the greatest conceivable being with no room for potentiality.
okay.
If you
The
could think of anything
ontological-
greater than God,
Yeah, I
that
know
Like,
the
alone
that
would be
argument is
God.
fine.
I know the ontological argument,
I'm
but
not given the ontological
definition-
argument.
Josh, definitions are concepts. We've invented them. We invented the words themselves. Language is fabricated
You
by
got
humans.
your definition of what's trustworthy by an 18th century philosopher named David Hume, and I've responded to that old archaic argument. Andrew?
Hang on.
I was just going to say that I'm butting up against my next appointment, so I'm going to have to say goodbye to
Yeah.
everyone.
Andrew,
So,
thank you very much for taking part. And Andrew, I love your voice. You've got a great, I don't know what that accent is. Which part of America?
I'm from the Midwest, so
All right, yeah. Ohio or somewhere?
yeah, that's the right neck of the woods. So
Yeah. It's a great
I really
voice.
appreciate it.
You've
Thank
got
you.
a good voice for radio.
Well, thank you very much. And I would like to commend everyone. I know this is a heated topic and probably close to the heart of everyone's identity, but it seemed everyone was very polite and respectful. And thank you very
Not my
much.
identity. Don't worry. No, definitely not.
No identity here. No.
You didn't convince me a bit, a shred, not a little.
It was very hard to debate you, Elisabeth, because you're so beautiful.
Oh my gosh! Next time I turn up. No, next time I will have Christopher Hitchens, a big picture. Promise.
No, but-
Goodbye, everyone,
Thanks,
and
Andrew.
Goodbye.
may that which grounds your existence do the very best for you.
Thank you,
Yes.
Andrew.
All right. Well, I guess we'll come to an end. You know what? I'm glad, because at the end of the day, we're friends. I mean, we're not like super buddies, but we're people, and you know, we all show respect towards each other, and you know, I look forward to the next opportunity, and yeah.
Great. I look forward to hearing from you in the comments, especially about your super duper natural realm.
I
Yeah.
already answered it. I said, "Great, God is the greatest conceivable being with no room for potentiality." If you could think of something greater, that would be God. Not just, I'm not using the ontological argument, therefore postulating that therefore that makes God does or shows God does exist.
Yeah, Josh, when I can have a last sentence to say, please, then I will shut up. The problem is all these arguments do not bring you to your particular God. They can be used for all God claims. They are not particular. You just take the leap. You just make this big, huge jump and jump to my particular God. Therefore, my particular God.
Oh,
When
it's
you
a
look
cumulative.
let me finish. But when you look, let me finish. But when you look at the arguments themselves, you will realize they're not sound because the premises haven't been proven to be true. So they're all fallacious. And even if you have the best argument in the world that is sound, you still need to provide evidence in the real world.
I think
And
I did. I think I did try to argue that many of the things you said were logical fallacies, including
No, they
the
aren't.
genetic fallacy.
But you couldn't tell me why they are logical fallacious.
Yeah,
Tell me what
I
is
said this is
the premise that is
you said
not true.
100,000 religion started 100,000 years ago, and therefore I pointed out the genetic fallacy. that
No,
shows for
no,
that.
no, no. Let me just
Yeah, yeah.
repeat my argument, please. Let me just
No,
repeat the
we're
argument.
done. I think we're done. It's
I made
been
the
really
argument. Okay, Josh, see the
No,
video
no,
again. I made
Elizabeth, calm
watch
down.
the video again.
We're done. We'll save the
Okay.
material for next time. And
2 minutes ago you were criticizing me for doing Hume for 150 years ago. Now you're claiming that because Christianity has been going over 1,000 years, it's a good thing.
well, remember when I quoted Thomas Reed about the hobby horse, that in real life you use other arguments, not just a verificationist type of criteria for truth, but you use the criteria of lived life, explanatory scope. In real life, you're not an atheist, but you live like a Christian.
I'm done. I realize you're not an atheist. Thank you so much for the joke.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
I'm glad you left. You have a good night, John.
Good night. Yep, it's my bedtime.
Yes, sir. See you the 26th
Okay.
of May. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and have a good night, guys.
Yep. And I would like to, close this out by saying thank you for our guests. Thank you for our debaters, all the people that participated in this discussion. I apologize that I did not say things more, but I just it was just such a good conversation. I wanted to see how it played out. What has been asked in the comments is what is evidence, and they're claiming empirical evidence is the only type of evidence. That seems to be a common thing. And, and instead of adding the philosophical areas of evidence, but that's not something I didn't think that it would be conducive to the discussion to actually go off into that, because I thought the discussion would just go into the weeds. But because some people in the chat have been asking what is evidence, I figured that I would just state it now, that as they did earlier in the stream, they're defining evidence as empirical evidence. And it's not my job as a moderator to refute anything. I'm just here, and I kind of failed a little bit. Because I did let people talk over one another, and I shouldn't have. But if you guys like these type of things, and you want to see more, please go to redpillreligion.com. That is the way that you can support us. You can read whatever work we do. We do post daily content on Red Pill Religion, either the videos that the videos and the streams that we do, or we also accept submissions and whatnot from people. You can support us in many ways. The most obvious way is to like, subscribe, and share the video out far and wide. That is the most common way of supporting us. You can also support us financially. All that's on redpillreligion.com. That our shop and all that. But
and let me just say, I want all of y'all, if you're listening to this, to be sure to subscribe too, because we're going to be bringing on the top atheist philosophers, scientists in the world, and me and Andrew and others will be debating them. We are bringing the fight to atheism and defending our beliefs in the highest philosophical manner we can. Okay, John Baptiste, you want to end this?
yes. Please give us a like. Please give us a subscribe. Tell your friends and enemies, and be sure to go to redpillreligion.com and check us out. I will see you guys. This is John Baptiste of Red Pill Religion, and God bless everybody.